Okay, so we are continuing now in chapter 7 of your textbook on public speaking, and page 108. Page 108. And so we have talked about different techniques to create a coherent speech. Now we're going to turn to how to really outline your speech, or some practical advice for outlining your speech. And that's actually, I think people struggle with that part a lot more than with everything else, because it just has to do with practice. Okay, so several really good advices that the authors of this textbook offer you. First one is, when you outline your speech, this is your testing ground. When you start creating an outline, that's kind of when your speech idea and your central idea that you're developing, and whatever thoughts that you may have floating around in your head about that particular speech, that becomes a testing ground. You basically test how good your speech is by putting it on paper. A lot of times, without putting it on paper, without creating an outline, it sounds good in your head until you like stand up and have to try to articulate it to other people, and then you start thinking about, oh, this is missing, that's missing, I should have said this, I should have said that, I forgot this, I forgot that. All sort of brilliant points come to your mind, but it's too late because you're already delivering it and it's not working. So what you do is you create an outline, get your ideas out, and that outline becomes a test. And then as you are writing out that outline, all of a sudden other ideas come into your head, and you say, you know what, this is a better way of saying it, or you know what, I really should use that example. And so in that process of writing out the outline, your speech actually is getting better, because you're working it out, you're working through it. And so it's, outline is a test of your speech, and how good it is, essentially. And so your outline also is a guide. You're guiding your audience, you're taking them through the steps. So having those steps, 1, 2, 3, ABC, essentially creates a progress, almost like a roadmap, or as we talked about, traveling down the road. First, second, third, you kind of walk them through. And so creating a structure like that, you are telling your audience where you've been and where you're going. So that's very, very helpful. It's helpful for you too. And so what does it take to develop a rough outline? Basically, you have to get your central idea, and then from that central idea, you develop points and subpoints. I don't know if you guys want to practice this with me or something like that, but you're welcome to give me, challenge me with a topic that you think I would know or something like that. And, let's see if we can develop a simple outline. Let's just play around. Let's just have some fun. Let's create a rough outline. I'll do it just like that off the top of my head. So you guys have a topic for me? Would you like me to give a speech on a particular topic? Try to pick one that you think I would know. Anybody?
Maybe a topic about I don't.
All right, come on, give me some topic, and we'll develop it.
What about now that it's very common, the pandemic?
Pandemic. Okay.
And yeah, let's say, what is your point? Because right now there's a lot of points that if the vaccine comes, then there's gonna be like something like there's gonna be a chip inserted in the, I don't know. There's a lot of points.
No, you got it. Excellent. Fantastic. Vaccine. You gave me a great topic. Vaccine. All right. So pandemic, vaccine. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to develop a central idea. And if I'm going to talk about vaccine, what I am concerned about, and what a lot of people I think are going to be concerned about, is safety. Is the vaccine that they're developing right now safe? I think that would be on a lot of people's minds, right? As they're thinking about it. All right. So if I want to ask that question, if the vaccine is safe, how can I state my central idea? I am going to argue right now for the point is that a vaccine that is rushed to the market is probably not safe. And if I decide I want to scare all of you and not taking the vaccine, I mean, I'm just going to play what we call in America devil's advocate, right? I'm just going to make it. I'm just going to say, you know what? Vaccines are generally good, but since they're rushing this one to the market, since everybody is scared of this COVID epidemic, they're making it as fast as they possibly can, and they're probably making some shortcuts, and I'm not sure it's safe. So I'm going to say my central idea would be, is a vaccine that's rushed to the market safe or unsafe? You know, are we sacrificing, sort of say, quality because we are rushing it? We're making it fast. So that could be my central idea. Now I have to think, I have to kick around. How can I phrase that right? I have to make it a statement. So I'm going to say, my statement is, a rushed vaccine is dangerous. That's the point I want to make. Maybe that's not the best way to say it. Sometimes when I start writing things out, I'll keep reworking it and keep reworking it and keep reworking it until my wording is perfect. But it will be something along the lines of, a hurried vaccine is no better than no vaccine, or something like that. I'll try to make it a little more dramatic. Again, remember, I really want to shock you, and the goal of my speech, my general purpose is to, let's say, dissuade you from taking vaccine, or my general purpose is to make you aware, let's say, of the dangers of taking a vaccine that hasn't been fully tested. Let's put it that way. So I'm just going to raise awareness. I don't even want to convince you not to take it, because in the end, for a lot of people, it's a fear factor. I'm just going to make you aware that maybe you're not making a right decision or something like that. And that's it. Kind of put a little doubt in your mind. If that's my goal, then I'm going to have to phrase my central idea in a certain way. Is a rushed vaccine better than no vaccine? All right, so what would I need to prove my point? I probably need some data. I probably need some information. And right now, off the top of my head, of course, I don't have it. But I would have to probably look up some information on vaccines that we have done in the past. And I would have to look up information on how long does it take for an average vaccine to be developed. Now, I don't know this topic well enough because I'm not a medical professional. I don't work in the area of vaccines. But I know where to find that information. Where do you guys think I would go to find that information? If you were writing my speech, if you pick that topic, where would you go to look for the facts? Besides entering Google, okay? Google doesn't count. Take me to specific places. Where would I go?
To the library.
To the library, yes, perfect. So where in the library, what would I look for in the library to find questions about how long this vaccine takes to develop a vaccine?
We're gonna go on the medical for the medical books, and then we're gonna search about it.
Yeah, I would go to the medical section, find some general medical books about viruses and vaccines and how long it takes to develop vaccines. And so hopefully I'll find some information there. That's a good place. One place I might go is like CDC website or something like that, because that's what they do essentially. They develop vaccines. I may want to look up some of the major research companies that actually create vaccines. Once I find out which companies out there create vaccines, like major ones, let's say a flu vaccine or something like that, I'll find that out. Then I will see, what does it actually take to create a vaccine? How long does it take? So if I want to convince you that a vaccine is being rushed to the market and it may not be safe, then I'd have to have that information. So by looking up that information, I would have some facts, probably some points that I can make that will be backed up by those facts, right? Because you're not going to just believe me just because I said something, But if I have some good information, some good facts presented in a reasonable fashion, then, it's easier for you to, accept what I have to say. So you get my central idea, and so now I kind of know where direction I'm going to take. So now I have to make my main points. So what would be my main points of my outline for a topic like that? I would have to say how long does it take to develop a vaccine? That would be my point number one. How long did it take, to develop the COVID vaccine? That would be my point number two. And, and what are the safety precautions that are usually taken in developing a vaccine? And what were the safety precautions or the procedures that were used during developing this particular vaccine? And then I'm going to compare that information. And by simply comparing and contrasting how things were done in the past and how things are done now, and what might have been done differently in order to make this process quicker and speedier, I may be able to have a good point in the end. You see how different the process is. Don't tell me they're not cutting some corners. Don't tell me this vaccine is 100% safe, because how many results do we have? How many trials have we done? And the truth is probably not enough, and then I will be able to make my point. See, a rushed vaccine maybe is not any better than no vaccine at all. And that would be my conclusion, essentially. That's kind of how I would close the speech. So I would make those 3 points, and I would do a comparison and contrast. That would be something, because I'm trying to convince you. I'm trying to kind of create a little bit of doubt maybe in your mind of, if I perceive that everyone wants to rush out and get the vaccine, then, and I'm not sure that it's safe, then I want to raise awareness. Is it really safe? Well, they tell us it's safe, but they didn't do all the same work they do with other vaccines. So how can we know for 100% that it's safe? Well, we can't know 100% that it's safe, because the only way to know is to rely on these things. And we don't have these things. We don't have these trials. We don't have the time. We don't know all the side effects that might happen. We haven't researched it enough. We haven't done enough trials. And that could be my point. So you could see. So I'm going to develop, probably 3, maybe 4 main points that I want to argue. And I'll try to back them up with data. I'll try to back them up with information. As Maureen said, I'll go look it up. What does it normally take to develop a vaccine? I may take other vaccines, information on how long they were worked over and how they were developed, and give you a little bit of history, sort of say. And then I compare it with how this vaccine is being developed, and all of a sudden you are able to see the difference. And then you can make a judgment for yourself, because I'm not telling you to accept my words for what they are. I'm actually proposing, to accept my supposition. And my supposition is that maybe this vaccine is not as safe as they say it is. And that's all I want to convince you about, that it's not maybe as safe as they say. And that's how I would develop my outline. But as in the process of me writing it down, I would probably start fine-tuning my points and my examples and my illustrations and my data. I may want to use a chart. I may want to use a graph. I may want to use an example. Now, the only way I'm going to be able to come up with that stuff is to actually do the real research and start writing it out step by step, and sort of say, using my bone structure and then growing some meat on top of it. And so that's how that's going to happen. So you begin with a rough outline. You start drawing out those ideas, and then you move to the more specifics, to the more greater details, essentially. Okay. So in this chapter, the authors have a nice little box right here on page 110 that I want you guys to see. And this is kind of a good important point that they make. They're talking about organizing your speech and how people's memory works. Okay. So a really important point that they make is about how many number of items can a person usually recall. Okay. And so this is what they say. There's a limit to the number of items a person can easily recall. 5 plus or minus 2. 5 plus or minus 2. That means most people may remember 5 things you say. Plus or minus 2. Meaning maybe they'll remember 6, maybe they'll remember 7, but probably not. More likely, they will remember 3. So if you're going to make a point, how many points do you want to make? Well, the suggestion they give you is between 3 and 5. 3 to 5. That is your golden middle. You don't want to go beyond that, because if you make more points than that, if your outline has more sections than that, you may not be very successful. Why? Because very simply, people are not going to remember what you said. Why? Because the way our memory works, for most people, if you remember 5 things, that's great. A lot of times you won't remember the 5 things I said. You may remember only 3. And that's the idea. So you don't want to go into too many points. Make your speech so detailed that you're going to lose me. And what's the point? Because I'm not going to remember it anyway. By the time your speech is done, I already forgot the first thing you said. You see, that's a problem. Now, they give you some suggestions on how to avoid doing that. What if you do have quite a few points? What if your speech is very detailed and you have a lot of stuff? Well, simplify it if you can. And one of the ways that they suggest to do it is they call it chunk it. Chunk it. So what does that mean? You make chunks of information. You basically take a lot of points that you have and you organize them under one particular area. Okay? So you present your information in groups, basically. You group it. That's what they mean by chunk it, is group it, put it into a section and present that as a section. So if a person does not remember the specific particular things that you put into that section, at least they will remember the section. And knowing that section, at least they will know what in the world that you were talking about. So that's one of the methods to do it. Another is using mnemonics. Mnemonics are very, very effective. Numbering things is effective, but also creating associations with the same letters are powerful. So like, reduce, reuse, recycle, for example. People use that one all the time. The 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce your usage, reuse things that you've used before, and then recycle things that you're not going to use anymore. That's great. Why is that? Why is it so easy to remember? Because it all begins with an R, and it's only 3 points. So you could do something like that. Organize your speech about the ABCs of the vaccine or something like that. And then your first point begins with an A, your second point begins with a B, and your third point begins with a C. And if you present it like that in the beginning, and then state it throughout your speech, and then summarize it, your ABCs of the vaccine, so that everybody's going to remember what you said. So again, this is, sometimes it's called alliteration, sometimes it's called mnemonics, but basically you're creating a linguistic device in order to link certain things in my mind and to create a system of me being able to remember and hold on mentally to the points you made. And so that is using the memory that people have to create a memorable system, a cohesive system for them to be able to follow and to keep in mind as you present your speech. That could be very, very effective. If you can create an outline by using this technique, it would certainly improve people's ability to remember your points. Now, this is all art, as you could see. It's just fancy. People have to be imaginative to come up with things like that. But I think limiting your points to a number that they suggest here in the textbook, that everybody can do that. And that means you may have to take some smaller points and not use them. You may have to take your strongest points. Now, sometimes when I create a speech and I write out an argument for something, I think of as many arguments or as many, things that I can say, and I make a list of them. And then I might eliminate some of the, weaker arguments from my list, or I will refine my stronger points to include some of those weaker points, kind of like as a sub point. and I essentially will eliminate it to a much smaller number, so that all I have is this 1 or 2 or 3 arguments that are really strong, and I'll get rid of the weaker ones because they don't help me, or they don't help me as much. So you always want to focus on the strongest ones. So so that's one really helpful section right here, talking about using how people's memory works in organizing their speech. So we have some good outlines there on page 110. It's very nice, kind of like 1, 2, 3, ABC. You could see that's very nicely organized. If you can learn how to make outlines like that, that are cohesive, I think it's a good start. Yeah, it's a good rough outline. But from your rough outline, you're building a speaking outline, and that's a little bit different. Your speaking outline is more focused, and it's more along the lines of shorthand. Your speaking outline needs to be in a conversational tone. You do not read your outline to your listeners. The outline is just to give you an idea. What you do is you are creating little notes for yourself. You basically use keywords. You can always use even shorthand to just give yourself, sometimes all you need is one word to remind you what it is that you wanted to say, and that's all you need. So you don't need to put out, a very specifically spelled out sentence if all you need is one word, because you're creating an outline for yourself. It's what we call a functional outline. It's a speaking outline. It's the one that you're going to use to deliver your speech, not to share it with everybody else, but it's for you. And so your speaking outline focuses on keywords, key phrases that will help you deliver a speech effectively. You may put some directions for yourself into that outline. And so it could be much, much shorter, much smaller, much simpler. Let's put it that way. So because the last thing you want to do is stand in front of people and then look at your outline and try to read your points. You're not supposed to write out your speech and read it. You're supposed to write out your outline, which you only need to glance at for a moment to remind yourself what it is that you wanted to say, and then you go straight to your, point, because it's in your head. So that's how good you have to be, essentially, in your speech. So on page 112, the authors are, giving us some suggestions of how to create an outline like that. They say use keywords and phrases. All right. Just enough to trigger a memory, just enough to trigger the right sort of, say, association in your mind. And they say that you can write out precisely only things that need to be said in a very precise way. So, for example, if you're quoting somebody, obviously you want to write out that quote. Reading somebody else's quote, because it's important to say it word for word, is important, and that one you should read. That's okay. Or getting specific facts or details that it would be hard to memorize. You want to write those down, but you don't want to read your speech. Because trust me, nobody wants to listen to somebody stand and read from a piece of paper. They will just tell you, why don't you just hand me that piece of paper and go sit down, because I can read myself. I mean, that's what I'd tell people who try to read a speech from a piece of paper. I know how to read. I don't need you standing reading it for me. I can do it. Just hand it to me, But so you want a speech. You want somebody speaking from their heart. You want somebody speaking from the essence of what they have to say. You want some passion. You want some interest. You want, charisma. You don't want to just read it. So you can include little directions for yourself in your outline. Some people need a little direction like breathe or pause, or something like that. I used to put, into my outlines a joke, and I would make a little quick reference to a joke, So if I'm doing a particular speech and I want to tell a joke, that is appropriate for that speech, a lot of times I would say, okay, joke, and I would put a little note to myself, and I know which joke I want to tell. and then I move on to the other point. I simply don't want to forget it. I don't need to write out a whole joke. I just need to give myself a reminder. Or if I want people to look at a particular page, let's say I'm delivering a report and it has multiple pages, and I want them to be on page 17, I would say, in my point number 2, before I get to page 17, I could say, turn with me to page 17, and then I will start introducing that. And as they're flipping their pages, by the time they get there, which could be 30 seconds, 40 seconds, I have already gave them an outline and a summary of where I'm going. I'm going to give them a forecast, and then when they already have the page 17 open, I can say, okay, now see on page 17. See, but it took them a while to get there. So if I said, turn with me to page 17 and started speaking about page 17 right away, nobody has it already there. Nobody has it turned to that page. So I'm wasting my time, and I'm wasting actually their attention, because they're focused on trying to get to that page. They're not even listening to what I have to say. So essentially, there's these little techniques of giving yourself notes of when to do things, little action items, okay? And then you can also emphasize certain words by bolding them in your outline or highlighting them in your outline. Why? Because you want to stress that particular idea, and you want to emphasize it. So you do that. And then, of course, you use your speaking notes to practice in your practice session, and you refine them. So remember, we talked about rehearsing your speech. And so rehearsing your speech on camera, in front of the mirror, whatever you got to do. But the idea is that you do want to rehearse, and you want to rehearse with that outline, not the full outline, not your working outline, not your draft, but your speaking outline, which is a little bit different. It's shorter, it's more succinct, it's more keyword focused, and it doesn't have everything spelled out, because it's just for you. It's an internal outline. All right. So a few more guidelines here on preparing your outlines. One of the advices that the authors of the textbook give you is how detailed your outline should be. Really depends on your subject and depends on your speech. Some speeches require a very detailed outline, other speeches not so much. It also depends on your skill, on your level, and your knowledge. So how much memory do you need to sort of say engage? If you know the topic well, you don't need a lot. If you are still unfamiliar with the topic, you may need a little more. It really depends on the speech, let's put it that way. But each unit of your outline should contain only one main idea, and that is really important. So when you write your outline, make sure that you're not trying to cram too much into one point. Make a point, make another point, make another point. But each point should be complete in itself. Or it could be sequential, dependent on another point, but still only one point at a time. People actually can't take it all at once. It's not how our minds work, basically. And then subordinate less important ideas under more important ideas, is what I told you before. You pick your strongest argument or your strongest point and you put them first. And then your weakest one, you put last. That's usually how it works in Western society. In Eastern societies, it's a little bit different. So it really depends on culture and who you're addressing. But most Westerners like their strongest points first and the weakest points later. But in the East, people like it the other way around. So it really all depends on your culture. But if you're speaking to a typical American audience, do it as the textbook suggests. And then use effective, vivid language. Use powerful language, strong words. Use really good adjectives to describe it. If you notice that a lot of times when I speak and I explain something, I will say the same thing in a variety of different ways, and I will use different adjectives to describe it, because I know that the effect that adjectives have on the mental pictures or descriptions that they create in our minds. And that's all I'm trying to do. For the sake of clarity, I will use a number of adjectives, and I will use very vivid illustrations or examples to illustrate my point. And that's a technique. I'm not anything special in the sense that I'm just using a technique that I know works. So another advice they give us is be concise. Okay. That means make it clear, make it simple. Don't stretch it out more than it has to be. Use vivid language. That means speak clearly to the point. And, use not flowery words, but appropriate and impressive words that will communicate clearly what you have to say. And then use parallel structure if you can. There's a certain amount of repetition or structure, that you can build into your outline. By parallel structure, we can talk about, mnemonic devices. We've talked about like the 3 R's or something like that, or the ABC, or you can use a key phrase, something like if you're making a motivational speech and you want somebody to start eating healthy, or something like that, you could say, strive to eat, fruit, strive to drink water, strive to, walk 5 miles a day. See, what I'm doing is I'm using the same introduction to my sentence, strive to. And so that strive to, strive to, strive to becomes a pattern. If I make 3 points and each one of them begins with the phrase strive to, what I'm doing is I'm creating a certain amount of parallelism. It creates a pattern that is memorable now. And that parallelism helps my listeners to follow what I have to say. So anyway, you could do that in your outlines. You can do that in your speech. And if you build that in, it creates a powerful device for people to be able to follow you. So what are outlines really all about? They're all about organization. They're all about structure. They're all about how you choose to structure and then later present your ideas. And the more thought and the creativity you put into it, using some of these techniques and suggestions that the authors offer in this chapter, the more effective your speech will be. So, of course, the challenge for you is to try it out. So you'll have, you'll have opportunities, sort of say, to build these things, and you have opportunities to use some of these techniques. And I'll be looking for those techniques. I'll be watching. I'll be listening, because that's what I want to see, essentially. Because when you start utilizing these techniques, I'll recognize it, and I will appreciate it, and I will evaluate your assignments accordingly. All right, that pretty much completes our chapter. That's what I wanted to highlight for you guys in this particular chapter 7. All right,